to our third episode of The Brass and the Truth. Today's topic will be fraternization. What it's like in the Army, what we've experienced in our lives, and current stories to include that from Salty Soldier with Lieutenant Lacrome and a couple high-ranking officers that may or may not have received punishments appropriate for their involvement with other soldiers and or sexual misconduct. Going to Red Leg, our lovely field artillery officer. What do you think, man?
Yeah. I was going to save this for later, but I might as well just go ahead and say a bit of it. Fraternization, yes, everyone thinks of sexual, but it's not always sexual. As anyone who reads the regulations, it's anything social, even business. Um, you may not think about it, but even playing video games can be considered fraternization. But if you're in the military long enough, you will know that fraternization happens far more than what people want to admit, especially the big army, even the DoD. If they knew how often it actually happens, I would think that they may make some changes. And we'll probably discuss more about that later on. They should stick to what they have now, or they should make some refinements. And luckily, we have a guest today who is on the other side of the component to give his viewpoints on it as well.
Yeah, so I think it's also there's the broad stroke term of when people think of it, they think of positions of power with regards to the rank structure, and then even coming from like cross organizational. And as you said, Red Leg, it's a very much most of it looks at it in the sexual content type of way. But I think fraternization itself is such a broad term that we see that a lot of people tend to forget. That's like I was really good friends with Joe Schmo, but then I went to OCS, and now Joe Smo and I are still good friends. But there's this weird situationship now where we're not in the same unit, but we're still friends. Like how can we interact without there being some weird mutations within there? Especially if I get reassigned to that unit, or we end up in the same unit together, and we have this past relationship and past history.
Yeah, I had a fellow officer, she was coming up to be in the position behind me, and she only had one of her squad leader NCOs that was even close to her age range that would have understood her in any kind of way. And when they hung out together, I mean, they were scrutinized to the point that I think she said, screw it. I'm actually going to, if they're already going to make the rumors, go for it. And I think that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't put pressure on her with those weird relationships. So I wonder how much of fraternization, like you were talking about, is driven by the culture and the other things going on.
Yeah, you also got to remember not every lieutenant is a brand new military personnel of a 24-year-old individual. You have green to go individuals. So you got a lot of people who have gone through a career as an NCO, so they can relate to a lot of these NCOs as well.
I think that could be a totally another topic for another day, is discussing the different commissioning sources and how officers from ROTC versus the academies versus OCS versus direct commission, and how their like mentality coming into the rank could affect their leadership style. But that could be a whole nother episode if you guys wanted to talk something like that. But with regards to the fraternization, like if we look at the Army pubs, like with the regulation with regards to what they're like, just the very first definition of what is our 600-35 going to be talking about is the standard procedures for soldiers to have a clear set of guidelines for interpersonal relationships are acceptable and non-acceptable. And then they give you, a solid, how many pages is this? Like almost 17 pages of like notes and examples without clearly defining like, hey, these are just examples like that we can show good things and bad things. And it's like sometimes you just gotta, like, in my opinion, it's just like, be adults. And going to our MP's point of view is like sometimes I think we put social pressures on individuals. It's like, oh yeah, like we already know that, like they obviously got to be doing something because they hang out so much. And when they start hooking up, is it because they really wanted to, or is it because like, hey, everybody already thinks we're doing it, so like F it, we might as well just do it. And I think that could almost just be like, why do we socially do that? Is that a form of sexism in and of itself. I mean, where do you draw that line? Now, coming from the reserve side, where I have my one hat that I put on the weekends when I put the uniform on, and then taking that hat off, like, what does fraternization look like on the civilian side? And that kind of gets more into, I think there's more clear definitions of, hey, you can't do this with customers, or you can't do this with senior ranking officials, because then that shows a sign of favoritism. I feel like there's almost a more clear cut on the civilian sector, because
Mm-hmm.
the job market's so much more narrow, whereas in the military we have a lot of limits that we have to set with regards because of the mission set and who we interact with. And
Mm-hmm.
I've even seen it, right? So you have a friend, same rank, you guys are friends at that rank, your individual promotes to a higher rank and they become like the OIC of your unit. But now you have to clearly draw that line. It's like, hey, we're still really good friends and we're going to hang out all the time because we had that relationship before you became my OIC. But when we're at work, like, we act like we're not friends, or we still act friendly, but not in a professional sense where no one thinks that I'm going to get shown favoritism, almost to the point where I'm getting treated more harshly than my peers because the OIC is afraid of being accused of favoritism. Not my personal experience, that's my spouse's personal experience that I got to witness, because I even had to walk that gray line where it's like, hey, I've been really good friends with this individual, they're a major now, but I also know that everybody in this unit's super catty and whatnot, so we have to like walk that fine line. It's like, that's why I don't do much on social media, because like, you don't have a social media footprint, and it's going to become a he said she said unless someone's being weird and like taking pictures of things when you're just hanging out with somebody, which that's a whole nother line of like, why are you doing that? But I think it really comes down to, if we really look at it, the military doesn't treat adults like adults. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a bunch of 18-year-old kids coming into this unit. They're being thrown a massive amount of responsibility. Like, shit, you just signed for $100,000 worth of equipment. Like, we can talk all about how the military expects so much out of us, but when the get down and dirty, leadership doesn't allow us as individuals to be adults, because we have this higher standard that we're supposed to hold her to, and one rotten egg spoils everything. So everybody
Mm-hmm.
starts getting like, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this, and then people start lashing out about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely individuals that do need to be babied.
And because of our
They're
organization, we have to work down at their level.
yeah.
We have to
You
lock it down
shouldn't
at the weakest
put
link.
this whole group because of one individual like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but we've also seen in Devil's Advocate that, well, people always get mad at the guy who shows up to PT without, his hat or gloves or shows up in the wrong uniform for this, that, or the other. And we dislike the group punishment effect that often happens. The reason for that, at least for Devil's Advocate side, is because peer pressure is the number one way to fix a problem child when it comes down range
A
deployment
hundred,
time.
100%. What was the scene from Full Metal Jacket with the soap and the socks?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a,
Like, it is like, you have to be an adult, but you also have to like check up on your buddy. And there is, like I said, there's that stark difference between what we're doing in this job field versus what you do on the civilian job field, because it's a lot more if you think about it in the long run, your job as a soldier is to, in the long run, like, baseline is you're a rifleman. Your job is to go down range when we need it and defend and serve. When we're in peacetime, it's completely different. We're preparing for that eventuality. That's what being in the military is defending the sovereign interests of America.
and I
And
do
that's why
think they
we have,
abuse that
yeah,
um, to some degree. I would say there's a necessary action that should be taken when fraternization takes on the form of unhealthy or favoritism or truly
Mm-hmm.
is that problem. The
yes,
problem we're seeing here is, I think it is too, like you guys said, based on the examples, it's too situational, and a command
Mm-hmm.
team could weaponize it against someone they don't like and not
Mm-hmm.
have the same intended effect that the reg was meant to have in eliminating problems that would rear their head downrange. Um,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to
Yeah.
kind of direct us now towards, this story that we've come to talk about. Redleg, can you, kind of walk us through Lieutenant Lacrome's story, since you have the most familiarity at this point?
Yeah, so there's been three different types of articles published by the Salty Soldier. You can find all these on Facebook. I would advise using your phone because if you try it on your computer, it would be flagged. I do have some, I guess you could say, personal understanding because of the fact that this is at Fort Sill. I did my bullet at Fort Sill. So she was stationed at Fort Sill as a PAO, so public affairs officer at the time of the supposed incident. But according to her LinkedIn, she was a PL and a commanding officer at 44 FAB, which is your basic training unit at Fort Sill. But she transitioned to the PAO role at Fort Sill after the unit's shut down. The supposed incident of fraternization was with a specialist, Cheyenne Rademacher, a 68 Charlie, which is a nurse. So I'm going to say they're not in the same unit. I'm going to probably assume that Lacombe was probably at the schoolhouse, if anything, while Rademacher was at the hospital. They don't say what, and they have not been provided with that information. So they are both been on TikTok for a while. Everyone knew who they were on TikTok, supposedly, and they had released a TikTok collaboration video that started the whole incident where there was a fraternization allegation. Well, later on, Lacombe posted on TikTok stating that she had already left the army through the med board process by the time that they had released that video, basically shutting down the allegation, saying that there can't be any type of fraternization. But she also stated that it was not voluntary. It had nothing to do with the allegation. It was forced upon her. As myself, who has gone through the med board process, it can be forced on you. It could be either voluntary or it could be forced on you. This depends on the circumstances. She had released a couple of videos after she was released by the Army in November 2024. So if you look at the timestamp of when those videos were released with the specialists, it was after November 2024. So Specialist Rademacher released a video recently that was in the recent article that was actually published today by the Salty Soldier. She has stated that she was flagged on numerous occasions by an Army social media ethics officer for her social media posts on TikTok. They don't state exactly who this ethics officer is.
Can I make an interjection real quick?
Yeah.
Was Lacrome a nurse?
She was a 13 Alpha.
13 Alpha. Okay, never mind that.
Yes, so field artillery officer. So that's part of the reason why I said when I said schoolhouse, I'm talking about the field artillery schoolhouse. I'm sorry, but I let that out. Force of habit.
No, you're good. I'm just reading the
it's for the audience.
And the specialist is trying to be a nursing specialist. I'm like, oh great, hold on, time out. We're talking about people in the medical field. I didn't realize it. It was a field artillery. That changes everything. Never mind.
Based on what they have said, they interacted each other through TikTok. They didn't met each other on posts. They're not in the same unit or anything. Anyways, this is ethics officer. It doesn't state if they're directly from the DoD or Department of Army. Nothing. This is their position. So obviously, she shows some documents that she received and showing the different flags, and it shows the different disclaimers, the usual stuff that you know as military personnel. Don't show your name. Don't post with your uniform. All this stuff. Then things that you're not supposed to do on social media, but military personnel just go ahead and do because they just don't care. Later on in the video, there's a section in the document that states that you cannot receive gifts from restricted sources. That includes money. She admits that she takes donations and quite a bit of money from people. So this brings into question if she is in any type of violation for doing so.
So I think that also falls under, because if you were to have a second business or a second job while full time in the service, there's certain memorandums that you have to submit and certain things that need to be
Mm-hmm.
signed off on. Which we could go look at other famous social media people, such as Mandatory Fun Day. He has an online store where he sells his Live Laugh toaster bath, the possum shirts, and all that whatnot. And if someone's going to bring something up about, because that, even on the civilian side, right, there's certain limits
Yeah,
that you can't accept donations, or you can't give donations or presents to potential clients over
yeah.
X number of dollars, right? Like, I think $25 is typically what the limit is. Like, a client can't, and like, here's like a nice Rolex, thanks for meeting with us, like, we hope we get this bid, wink wink nudge nudge, because that leads down to
Mm-hmm.
a bribery trail. Whereas though, if you take a client out to a Pittsburgh hockey game, that falls under a different regulation of entertainment, and that's completely allowed.
Yeah.
So I think there's the, again, we're
There's
digressing from this.
a risk of espionage because if a adversary, let's say China, they can always give her money and eventually turn her into a sleeper agent. So
Yep.
it's completely understandable. But yes, it's a matter of where does it state in the army regulations, like having a secretary job? Does it have to be a business or entrepreneurial job, or in this case, using TikTok to get money? You have to really look at it. But there's one more point to make on this. In this another section of the document, it states that she is a subject to Article 92 of UCMJ. If anyone knows anything about that article or don't, that is basically profanity. So she's under investigation for cussing on social media. Probably because she was in
Ridiculous.
uniform. Yeah, yeah. So yes, she's been around for doing things, but when you're talking about Article 92 and the fact that she's been flagged numerous times, but with no end results that cause her to get Article 15 or separate from the army or anything, it, to me, it just seems like the army is being a little petty and they're doing all they can to punish her. I mean, of the thousands of soldiers who go on social media and doing the same exact stuff that she is doing right now, and she's the one that's being targeted.
So,
It's
but let's also talk about it. Like, do we know? Did, because some of them, like, Mandatory Fun Day, I think I've seen articles where he's talked about all the stuff that he's had to file and
yeah.
work with his command team in order to be allowed to continue his social media presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have, obviously Army's going to pick and choose. Like, we've seen that aspect where they're not going to go after
Yeah.
everybody. They'll find somebody and they'll target them. It's like, where's the paperwork at? Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, if you don't have the right paperwork and trail to run your own social media account while utilizing that uniform, and someone's to start making a big stink, and all of a sudden you become popping up on news articles, yeah, they're going to start targeting you.
I think part of it though too you gotta look at is with him, he's using a name. He's using Mandatory Fun Day instead of his actual name, where she's using her legit name. She's using her first name and last name. I think that might be something that it has to be considered.
I think that's definitely something to look at and consider with the treatment aspect of what's going on.
Yeah, because I feel like it is a completely different approach at that point by just the government as a whole, because it's seen as a business when you use that type of name, like Military Fund Day or Army What the Fuck Moments, so on. But
Yeah, well, so
I,
okay,
I,
I can actually speak to this one. If so, Army WTF actually was created by a group of soldiers, one of which was my NCO, like in Georgia. One of the founders was a staff sergeant MP that I had, and his spiel about what that became and how that became was actually really interesting. And I think this is maybe even a topic for a whole nother episode on just social media presence. But they still go through the ethics office and have a pretty close relationship with Army CID because And I'll get after this quick aside, we'll go back to fraternization. Army What the Fuck gets multiple stories in from soldiers everywhere. And the first thing they do is look at it as, all right, is somebody in danger? Is somebody hurt? Is this potentially, you know, not funny? Because, he told me one time they had somebody send in a photo of some soldier passed out behind a dumpster. And the first thing they were thinking was, okay, did this person get assaulted? Did this, like, let's make sure this wasn't worse and that somebody just has a really sick sense of humor or whatever. So, like, they had a code and a purpose for showing off some of the dumb things. And I think Mandatory Fun Day does that. What
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about with Rademacher and Lachrome is a different intent in their presentation, and part
Mm-hmm.
of why I think, getting in trouble for cursing in uniform on a social media platform. We know that uh, other members of the military have definitely cursed or, made inappropriate jokes on the internet. But what was the intent,
And when you have to look at perception being reality, you have a service member who is going by their name on social media in
Mm-hmm.
uniform. The perception that you get, as most of us can look at from a civilian perspective, a lot of people will take things at face value. It's like, oh, this person's a service member. That's obviously the opinion of the service. And like it could just be their own personal opinion, but when you don't have those protective covers, such as Mandatory Fun Day, where it's obviously a persona account, but your own personal name tied to it while wearing that uniform, the perception then is this is your opinion, therefore the professional opinion of the service. And that again, so as our aggro said, um, Army WTF works very closely with CID. They're basically like a unconfirmed actual source of information. Like it's like official but not official. Like they've got those backdoor handshakes, and it's very clearly stated that this is a parody, not the actual opinion. We're just here to try and bring heat down where heat needs to be brought down. With regards to the fraternization, though, when you have an individual who's in this situation, they're trying to make these allegations and complaints brought up. It's like, but this is why you always have the CYOA. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we have the freedom of speech in America, but once you put that uniform on, you kind of lose a little bit of some of your amendment rights to what freedoms you have, because your voice is no longer your voice when wearing that uniform. You have to represent the greater organization and make sure that everything that you're saying is with regards to a very cut and dry standard line of this is what your left and right limits are. And social media has definitely made that a lot harder with regards to just wanting to go out and say something, because you really have to go out and separate and take that hat off and make sure it's not associated with that hat. Which is one of the reasons why I don't like social media. I doom scroll on it way too much, but I also don't post a lot to it because I'm not trying to get involved with anything, because I don't want anything to get tied back to me when I have my own personal opinions on stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is one
Well,
of those things where it's like that perception and that action of social media has just changed the game, and I think the service needs to update the regs for fraternization, but also for social media in
Mm-hmm.
general. And I think this story, for you, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to look at everything that's come out, to include the Salty Soldiers post. But where
There's definitely two faults now with this recent article, because we were talking about now the freedom of soldiers on social media. Obviously, this is not a fraternization.
red leg. I'm sorry. My spouse is rolling out, but they made a comment about some personal experiences going on with fraternization and made me
Oh
laugh.
yeah, especially
Because
when I imagine with her what she was doing
it was more
in
of a
her.
dig at the two of you guys. But
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I had to bring that up.
speak with her afterwards, then.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I was a saint in the service. I would never have ever fraternized with anyone.
Uh, so knowing that that Lieutenant Lacombe was out after the videos were made, there's no fraternization. But the question is, if she was in, was it fraternization? If so, is it fine? Like, should it be like, okay, sure, whatever, or should it be like the army, like, no, she needs to be punished type thing?
So the video where they do the little running and eat I think they were chicken or something. No, absolutely not. It was silly. Would it have been something the command team would have been like, hey, you probably shouldn't make these under the perception of this? Fine. The one where
Mm-hmm.
they're in the hotel room and flip sides on the bed with a bottle of alcohol shown in the video, stupid. No matter what we say
That's
or
just
what our
big dumb,
opinions
like
are, that's
regards of
just
Yeah.
anything. That's like stupid. Like even okay, let's take this out of the army perspective, right? You post a video of you're a mid-level manager and you post a video with someone that's on your team and you're in a hotel room, there's alcohol involved, dude, HR is going to be up your ass.
oh yeah.
Like that's like you may not get fired, but you're definitely going to probably end up being put on a PIP. And
Mhm.
9 out of 10 times in the civilian side, it's most likely going to be the lower worker that's going to get canned instead of the manager, depending on your relationship as a manager to the rest of the company. Like, HR is there to cover their own, prevent the company from a liability suit.
Mm-hmm.
I- Take the army out of this perspective. You got a video of someone as a manager or a leader in a leadership position with a position. And I'm bunny quoting over here, a position of power over somebody else, doing stuff in a hotel room. There, you can see alcohol. Yeah, like regardless of what uniform you put on, if it's a work uniform, a military uniform, that's going to get a lot of heat brought down on you. That's just like big dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. And so this is where like this was something they recorded, reviewed, and then posted. And out of the context of the hotel room, if you just went out to the bars and you happen to be there and you take a and you're just live streaming and you happen to see, your NCO, your officer, your soldier, whatever relation they are to you, that'd be different because in the moment I could be like, okay, this wasn't a planned thing. This wasn't a just you and them thing. It was public, but this was a planned, executed, reviewed, and then posted thing. And it was just like, if she had still been in the service as a command team, I'd say, okay, how long ago did this go up? Take it down. You might save yourself. But if this, if anybody had possibly been out there to see it from that team, the perception would then be, well, LT is cool with this medic. If she ever does anything stupid, she might not get in trouble, but I might. And so that just sets her up for problems down the line that she could have avoided. And so, to your question, Red Leg, if she was in the service still, yeah, I think there should have been action. Maybe not like the full on book, but
Mm-hmm.
something. And we can go on to how punishments are laid out for frat or sexual misconduct if we want to start heading towards the second story.
Yeah, we can cover a second story really quick as well, and I can touch on my personal story really quick from my unit, because the story I have is pretty wild, and we can talk about should there be some refinements to the regulations. If you want to talk about the next story,
All right,
Who
so
doesn't
our
want us to talk
next.
about it?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Big brother, big brother. So our next story is about a Colonel Kevin Russell, SF commander from Fort Bragg, charged with 5 counts of sexual assault. Going through court-martial proceedings, he was not found guilty. Impaired. I mean, goodness, I don't know if you intended for this, but like this is the first of story. There are others, but this is the one that we I think had most recently pop up, where
this is
it's
from this was 2020. This is a hot story while we were still in. Because we thought that because of his rank that he was going to be found guilty, but somehow he was found not guilty. But
so
if you read the full article, you probably find out why he was found not guilty.
oh yeah, well, and Weekend Warrior, for just so you know, in our research, um, Red Leg had found articles that show the conviction rate or punishment rate for officers ranking O4 and higher and E6 and higher was like 45 to 50%, while the punishment and conviction for the lower ranking officers and enlisted was closer to 80%.
You're looking at for our following up episode regarding that lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, well, it just ties in to the fact
Yeah,
that
just looking at this main article for Colonel, I mean,
it's a mess.
it is a mess, but it's also like the jury, they find him not guilty just due to just the witness statements and the relationship that they had leading up to it. Now, I'm not going to speculate too much on it because it's already been convicted. Like the jury's already passed their sentence on everything. But with regards to something like that, like this is another thing. You got to cover your own ass. And you just got to be adults, be safe, and think about what you're doing. Which is why it's like, you know what your left and right limits are. If you're going to go out there and do something stupid, and you got to deal with the consequences. And yes, I will tend to agree. I think the military tends to protect its own once they reach a certain rank, and that's not necessarily a good thing. There's some cases where, yeah, this person is definitely in the wrong, and we can look at the fact that sometimes, like, yeah, they're definitely in the wrong, but the military's going to do everything, or their unit's going to do everything that they can to cover it up, sweep under the rug, and move them around. But I don't have resources in front of me or articles in front of me to back those facts up. It's just a generalization knowledge that we see things like that. Now, I could even say the same thing in the civilian world. It's the higher in power you are, the more position you have, the more tenure you have, the more stake you have in a company. Things, unless you have a very solid paper trail against said individual, most likely the higher ranking person is going to be covered and protected.
Mm. Especially when we talk about the case for the follow up article episode. For anyone who does end up listening for that episode is disturbing. But anyways, we'll continue on with this article. I imagine those who were in the military heard about Colonel Russell. He was a full bird and he was having an affair with a captain. I'm really surprised it was just sexual assault that they charged him with. I would have thought that with UCMJ, they would give him adultery, and they would have also got him in the fraternization as well. I would just thought that they would throw everything at him, but they just gave him sexual assault. But
We also talk about the fact that he's special forces, and the individual he was sleeping with was a Air Force captain. So one, you have different branches, but you also have special forces within one branch. Like this is okay. Let's just say this. This is technically a case of fraternization, right? This is
yes,
fraternization. You have someone who's a super senior rank sleeping with another individual in a different branch of a lower rank. Technically that's fraternization if you look at the definition that the army publication has. Now again, this is only coming to public because somebody didn't like what was happening, so they brought things up and it wasn't kept private. Because like people do this all the time. Let's be real here. The army, people cheat on their spouses, or you got a bunch of swingers out there in the army because that's what they want to do. They're gonna go blow some stress off, and they have their own internal thing that they've communicated with their spouses, and they just go out and do their thing. It's when it becomes public that's when you get the aspect of, hey, this is fraternization or this is sexual assault, um, due to our reporting channels. And I'm not saying that sexual assault isn't bad. I'm saying it happens and people need to report that. It's when you have private relationships that could potentially take a turn. I got to word this correctly without sounding very pro assault now that I'm thinking about it. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like, adult people have relationships. When you're downrange, everybody's fucking horny. People are going to have sex. It happens. Now, how professional do you maintain it? That's where we can draw that line. Like if you get caught, okay, you guys get caught. If you're able to do it and everybody's 100% consensual with it, and then we don't talk about it again, it doesn't ever get brought to the public lies. Okay, it's like I'm not going to judge people for that. And then it's when it gets to the point is like, hey, so and so's getting special treatment. That's because I've noticed it. That's when the boundary lines are getting crossed. Now, I think I might be derailing from this specific story, but like these are the things that we all have to look at and think is like these are just factual things. Like people are gonna do it. Like it's just gonna happen. It's human nature, and it's as messed up as that sounds. It's like, again, we're as adults, we take responsibility for what we have to do. You be professional about it. You don't cross any boundaries, you're good to go. It's when you start crossing those boundaries and people start noticing, that's where it's okay, yeah, you messed up now because you made it way too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
But
this is one of those. There's too many stories of fraternization going under the rug for not just rank but convenience and
The
like
convenience is the worst thing out of it all. Is I don't want to do the paperwork. I don't want to do the
Mhm.
paperwork. Nobody wants to do the paperwork. And because of that aspect of it, that's when you have people's like, okay, this individual, I say this as a personal opinion, not a factual statement. I think it's when you have the laziness of I don't want to push paperwork. We know this is happening, but I'm not going to do anything to stop it. Then someone's going to get upset because like I've seen something is like that's how the rumor mill gets started, and then somebody, as you said earlier, could get socially pressured into saying like, "Hey, this individual sexually assaulted me." Not saying that everybody's lying about it. I say that that does legitimately happen, but I also think there's some cases where we've seen individuals say like, "Hey, this individual sexually assaulted me," and it comes out like no they actually didn't, but the male individual who was just accused of it, his life is completely ruined.
right, and all to protect either a career or avoid punishment, and then we really hope that that never happens. The percentage is low, but the fact that it happens at all means that there's a problem with how we approach fraternization in general and the way that we approach the relationships that are created in these environments where, and I don't think we've said it yet, the thing that separates the military and the reason that it's so different than the civilian world is we spend so much time together working, sleeping, eating in these environments. The military is one of the few professions where you truly spend so much life together that the bonds are close, regardless of whether you
Mhm.
intend them to be. Um,
Sometimes it just happens. It's
and,
And
not by choice. It just
and
happens.
it blurs the lines.
I think there are blurred lines, and I agree with that statement. I think people in the military, because you know, how a lot of people say is like you're not. You have coworkers and you have your friends. Your friends shouldn't be your coworkers on the civilian side. Like, yeah, I can kind of understand that. I have my coworkers. I talk with them at work. I don't really hang out or socialize with them outside of working hours. The military is different. There's like a different level of like the blood, sweat, tears, and trauma that we've all bonded through
Hmm.
in the military aspect. You are a lot end up being a lot closer with your military peers and coworkers and service members than you do on the civilian side. Like take us for example, shit. Like we never actually physically served together in the same unit, but we have all been mentally traumatized and suffered under the army, and here we
Yeah.
are in our 30s now doing a podcast talking about some bullshit that's still affecting us, and we haven't seen each
Mhm.
other in like 10 years, but here we are still talking and hanging out. We can still call each other at any moment because that's the type of relationship that the Army's
Yeah.
ingrained into us.
Yeah. The support structure of having people to lean back on that have shared experience is unquestionably one of the greatest things in my life is you guys. And not to get sappy, but just like it has been awesome to see the bonds that have been created through military service have truly done better than some of my own friendships outside. So it's hard to it's hard to look at people who built bonds that built into more and judge them too harshly. I know what it's like to,
It's
get
it's
close to
also
somebody
just
and like,
like at some point too, when you see people doing things and harming other people, you kind of take it personally. It's like, yo, man, I might not know this soldier individually, but we're still one big green family. And like, how dare the leadership at B throw this one person under the bus and like protect this other individual? Like, what the hell?
mhm.
And but granted, I'm not there in that situation specifically, but still, it is infuriating. It's like, as you said, we have this bond, but at the same time, we're all people, and we see these situations happen and arise, and it's just like, oh, there's like a little bit of like that gag effect. It's like, why did that happen? Why did we let that happen? How can we make it better?
Hmm.
As I crack open another beer.
Oh, hey, and alcoholism and culture in the military, I'd love to hit in another
Hey,
episode later
I'm
on.
gonna stick to my own true statement. You can't be an alcoholic if you're in the military. You're just a
Yeah.
soldier.
It just like everyone's attacking P. Heska saying he's an alcoholic and all this stuff. It's like you all obviously never been around the military. Then.
You're not an alcoholic until you get a DUI, and then to the
Ah.
leadership, you're the scum of the earth.
Yeah. But I
I
mean,
think that could be another episode right then
there's
and there. But
there's so many different things to discuss. I mean, honestly, like fraternization could be 2 episodes, to be honest, because it's such
well,
a hot topic for people.
yeah, and I'll say this right now. So my coworker who works in my office, it's just the two of us. I'm my civilian title, he's his civilian title. However, he just happens to be in the reserves on the Air Force side as an airman. Fortunately, right, our relationship's professional as civilians. That's all we know each other as. But if someone's going to be an asshole, they could technically say we were fraternizing. If they're like, if we're out hanging out, having lunch, or like doing things and just chilling, like, is that technically fraternization? No, I don't think it is because we're civilians. That's what we know each other as. Now, if I end up in Texas or downrange somewhere and airman shows up, I'm like, okay, cool, I know you. Like, I might have a better relationship with him because I've worked with him on the civilian side. But like, I also know my professional boundaries. I'm not going to show
Mhm.
him like, I mean, yeah, I'm a friendly person though. I get along with everybody. I'm gonna be friends with everybody. I might treat him a little bit more friendly because I know him. We have that relationship. But I've also got to watch myself and like make sure I'm not like, hey man, you want to come over and play some D and drink some beers on the weekend type situation while we're down range. Like, um, that's where that fine line is. Like, yes, I have this relationship with this individual, but if we're ever in the same room in uniform, I have to be more of the professional, like, hey, yeah, we're good friends, we're good coworkers, we're going to do our jobs right, but I'm not going to be like, you know, bending over backwards to do extracurricular type things. As much of an asshole as that makes me sound, it's like I'm trying to cover my own ass, as I don't want someone to make a complaint. I know he's not going to complain about it, but if someone
I
gives me
mean,
that perception that, oh, this captain's treating this airman so well, blah 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 blah, yeah,
again, though, everybody in the military experiences fraternization at some extent. This is why there needs to be some type of refinement to the current regulation on fraternization. To me, it's just way too extreme. You have experienced it. Your wife has she's experienced quite a bit of it. Uh, Agra has experienced it, and I've experienced it. And we have a current friend who has someone in their battalion that's experienced it. I mean, like this story that is from my battalion. I mean, I'll go crazy if I don't talk about it, but it's because it's. I don't honestly don't know how the sergeant did not get kicked out of the army. I'm really surprised. But I mean, again, this is why I said earlier. I don't. The military will never admit how rampant fraternization it really is. They just never will.
Oh yeah. Well, I know there's a ton of stories we can talk about, but I
Yeah,
wanna
no.
say, Weekend, do you remember our professor of military science stating that when the grade before us, or the class before us, graduated and commissioned, that we could no longer be friends with them because that would be fraternization between officer and cadet?
my
Yeah,
god,
that was
okay, it was worse for you guys because I was married to one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And like
it
that
was
got even more worse because like we had situations where it's just like I'm married to this individual, like I'm engaged, like
it
thank
was
God,
dumb.
dude. And then okay, so then someone in my class, they got married the year after me because oh my god, yeah, because I didn't commission till like a full blown year, almost 2 years after she did. So when my buddy got married, he was commissioned. Like I went and got more beer for his wedding because they ran out of alcohol. And like the next day, I'm in the lounge doing my homework, and he walks in. He's like, "Hey, here's the money for the beer. I can't be owing a cadet money." I'm like, "Are you shitting me, bro? Are you shitting me right now? Like I get what you're doing, sir. I get it." And I like gave him that very,
Sir.
very, very
Dude,
sarcastic.
why did you even?
I did that on purpose, like, okay, sir, like, if you don't really want to owe me, sir,
Oh
but
man.
it's still, yeah, because like, man,
I
we
think
could we could
let's
we could
go
also
back
talk about how
to
toxic our leadership
this.
was in ROTC. That could be its own episode, because
Yeah,
Oh,
we definitely want to talk about the
there was an
issues of
individual, and I remember his name and his face now. But do you guys remember when it was my wife's class had an individual who was at the SAC and he was working out. Somebody there filed a sexual harassment complaint against him. Our PMS went and kicked him out of the program before the investigation was done. And the investigation came back. The individual who filed the complaint stated that she had made everything up. She just wanted the attention.
Someone else. That was the class after Agro and I's class.
No, this was also in.
There was both.
Yeah, because I'm pretty positive this was in my wife's class. That might have happened in your all's class, the one below your all's class as well. But this person was a green to gold person who.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to drop names right now because
Yeah,
we're making a recording. This is going to be put up on the network.
right.
We can talk about this offline, but like that's a case where we have a blatant individual in a position of power who doesn't like somebody in their program. A accusation gets brought up before the investigation could be even be founded. They already assumed that the person was guilty, and they did the paper. They pulled all of the stops out to get this person kicked out of the program without grounds. And then when the university conducted their investigation, it turned out that the individual had lied about everything and even admitted to it and apologized to that person.
Well, two things though. One, that's a cultural thing here in the U.S. Second, we all know how that PMS is, but that is a whole thing with the military, though. That it could be a whole topic of its own that really needs to be cracked down on. Yes, we need to have sharp and everything, but it's been weaponized, and it cannot be weaponized like it's been.
It's no that I don't even think that's an American cultural thing. I think that's just a universal
There's been
cultural thing where
that have been accused of rape that later been found out to be innocent. It is become a thing in the U.S. to that where universities and even high schools, as soon as someone's been accused, they will either suspend them or outright kick them out. It has happened. It happened in the UK. The UK did that when we were in school.
I think that's just like a very stated fact that if you as a male get accused of sexual harassment, assault, and or rape, your life is over. Doesn't matter if you get found proven innocent or not. It's game over because of the perception. This is where it goes back to perception is reality. As a service member and as an adult, you have to make sure, especially when you're going to go out and post things on social media, you're going to go hang out with your enlisted folks, you're going to go hang out with people who are in your command team that outrank you. You got to be cognizant of perception being reality. And this is one of those things where it's like I've chosen my select group of friends, and I know who I can trust and who I can do things with, and then I also know who I can't. Like I can be professional and coworkers with them, but I ain't going out for dinner beers after we get off the clock because like I ain't trying to put myself in that position.
Everybody needs a litmus test, you know? It's
Yeah.
can you is this a stupid thing? Is this something that someone could look at this way? And I think if more people would take the time to say to themselves, all right, if I put this out there, and you can't live a life where you're gonna, I don't want to offend everybody, but is this gonna make someone else petty jealous to the point of going to my command? And or is this gonna give the perception of favoritism and all these things? I think you know for that you need friends that you trust in the same way you're talking about. Like if you went to if Weekend Warrior came to me with a social media video and said, "Hey, what do you think of this?" My first thing would be, "How do I protect this guy? Let me check this video and make sure." Like devil's advocate, because I think that's the vacuum where people.
And that's also like if you have someone come in, he's like, "Hey, what do you think of this video?" Before I post it, they're coming to you for honesty. They're not like, "Oh yeah, that's super cool." It's like, I don't know, man. That seems pretty fucked up. Or like, I'm fucked up, but that might get you in a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Like that's a trust thing. If someone's coming to you asking for that, but it's like as Agro's saying, is like that literacy test is like some people just don't think, and that's like I'm not even some people like almost everybody. Shit, I don't think sometimes. Like
That's why I
I'll be
don't
the
have
first
social
to
media.
admit it. So like I'll be the first to admit it. Like there's a reason why I don't post shit to social media or I don't share anything. It's like knowing me, I'll send something or I'll post something by accident thinking it's funny, and it's like, oh wait a second, like that was a suicide joke. No one's. I'm gonna get a bunch of messages like, are you okay? That's not cool. Like we need to talk. And I was like, oh god damn it.
I'll say this, and this could be part of our episode regarding ROTC and Officer Corps. Because of the culture of the Officer Corps, I feel as though there are some trust issues because of the fact there is. I mean, your experience might be different, but some backstabbing. I mean, definitely in ROTC there are some backstabbing because of the fact that you gotta get your leg up ahead of someone else to get to where you want to go. You got to make sure you trust the right people, because if you tell the wrong person, they may try to use it against you to be able to get that one position, like say PL. Like everyone's trying to get that same position, and they're going to try to use something against you to be able to get that position.
Yeah, I mean, or you can just take the mentality like me is like I'm just here to get my college paid for, and I'm gonna keep my head down and do my job. And I'm gonna do everything in my power to not get kicked out of the program, but I'm also not gonna go out of my way to be like everybody's favorite person. Everybody hated me in my class.
Yeah,
Granted, my class was also extremely cliquey.
not as quickly as ours though.
Oh yeah, y'all's was pretty bad. To be fair though, I think a lot of that
It's a golden childs though.
I think a lot of that stemmed from our actual leadership during that time frame. But again, that's this for another episode.
Yeah.
We're kind of diverging from fraternization. I think the whole point of this episode to our listeners is like, yeah, fraternization is a very broad term, and as stated earlier, I think everybody experiences it to an extent. Does the army do a great job at protecting people? Yes and no. The army also has to work down to the lowest level, and they have to protect their image because that's their image. And I think it's also just at the end of the day, you got to be smart. You don't be stupid, and you'll be fine. It's okay to go out and hang out with your soldiers. It is okay because like you need that bonding time.
Absolutely.
But it's not okay to start choosing one of your soldiers because you both are single and you guys are attracted to each other, go out and start fucking and showing special like attention to that individual as a leader. Like that's not okay. That's where it's like, yeah, that's obviously not okay. Don't do that. It is a-okay though to go out, grab a beer after a stressful situation or a stressful day. You put out a bunch of fires, go grab a beer with dinner with your team and cheer on the fact that you guys knocked it out of the ballpark and you did it. That is completely okay.
Now, I know, like, before this current regulation, while we were also cadets, it used to be where, say, like, you were at, say, Fort Bragg, and you're a sergeant, but you were talking to a specialist, say, at Fort Stewart. It was okay, but obviously now with this current regulations, that is AO, no, it's no, like, no bueno. It's not.
Yeah, it
Sorry,
changed somewhere around
yeah, it
2014,
was
I think, to be
2017.
more.
2017. I remember because we a bunch of the sergeants in my platoon talked about that for like a whole day. But thankfully, we have someone that specializes in all the regulations. You could say, is the current regulations the right regulations, or should we make some refinements?
Yeah, so
I haven't read the current regulations, so like I'd have to get back if we want to do another episode on this after spending time reading that and seeing what their actual regulation is. Which is bad because as a current commander right now, I should probably know that shit, but I don't.
okay, I do want to talk to this one, right?
Actually, the sergeants, and no one knows, or probably does know, and they just don't care.
You-
I do want to cover that real quick because I have to cut this at maybe a couple minutes. But to you, Weekend Warrior, as going in command, I don't think you necessarily have to know these things. Now, there's gonna be people out there that are like, "What do you? Whoa, you can't tell a commander that you shouldn't know."
No, I totally agree. I don't have to know them by like I don't have to have them memorized, but it's still something I should keep on the back of my head. Like, oh, there's a new regulation out there. I should probably be like try and like find out what it is just in case something happens and like I'm going off of old information.
You'll have an email sent to you with an updated like notification, like
Okay,
there's a new
that's a
regulation.
horrible
Dude,
answer, though.
I'm in the reserves, bro. I'm in the reserves. I don't get shit. I have to find
So
it.
yeah, and to that, I got so many emails from HRC about this change, that change, and nobody reads that
Please remove
because
me from this distro.
nobody read their emails on things that were relevant in the unit, let alone the regulation changes. Like,
Yeah, most of the time is you have to go out and figure like if you want to know something, you got to do all the research and look it up yourself.
oh yeah.
But
So to let you know, that reg changed in 2014. So the regulation changed in 2014 to be more specific to any rank discrepancy, not rank within the unit, so that if you did have that relationship between this post and that post, that you would um, be violating that guidance. Because the thing is, AR 600-20 does not cover fraternization. It has a subparagraph bullet that talks about it in maybe a sentence. Then the DA Pam gives, like you guys were talking about earlier, the examples. Oh, if a colonel and a sergeant sleep together, that's a no-go. And like, or if warrant officer so and so and lieutenant so and so go and do XY, that's, so those examples are in there and they cover a pretty wide base. But the only thing that truly prescribes the language is the UCMJ Article 134 section on fraternization. And even that gives language that allows for interpretation. And I think to cap this episode off, what we've talked about and what we've discussed is that in a very general sense, there needs to be updates to what is and isn't allowed, what in social media constitutes, and how we interpret each situation that allows for us to be humans, to have the camaraderie that, like Weekend Warrior said, to go out with our team and build those bonds in a healthy way without punishing every instance of that. And until that changes, I think we're going to see some of the same problems come up.
I'm 100% in agreement with that statement.
Yeah, that's what you see a lot of times on social media. People say, just let us be adults. I mean, you should be able to trust us to make the right decisions and that. But it should be a case by case basis, like it is. Obviously, if you're a company commander, you shouldn't be able to sleep with your soldiers in your company or battery or troop. But like it was prior to 2017, why was it an issue for someone to, like, say, a sergeant in one brigade to be able to chat with a specialist in another brigade? Obviously they had no influence on their career.
Yeah. So, Weekend Warrior, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Hopefully, I can come back for other discussions later on. Yeah, it was good chatting, good catching up, and I think that it was good discussion overall. Just the fireside beer chats with things like this. Of course,
Heck
everything
yeah.
we say is just our own personal opinions, and nothing reflects on any actual concurrent
DoD policy or,
DoD policies. This is not the actual official thought process of a DoD personnel. So
Hey, and for any listeners out there, I do want to say, hey, we'll take your comments. We'll respond. We hope to get interaction to, if you've got stories or questions, or if you just have an opinion out there, we'd love to interact with you on any of the platforms. Feel free to comment. And that's all we got for this episode of The Brass and the Truth.